Hi, and welcome to the Scenic Route podcast, where we believe in embracing life's journey with purpose, curiosity, and a bit of potty humor. I'm Jen, a sociologist, someone's uncool mom, and I'm always looking out for that perfect slice of gluten-free rhubarb pie. Every week, I get the joy of sitting down with dreamers and doers who dare to take the road less traveled in pursuit of their own magic. Together, we dive into the inspiring stories of soulful entrepreneurs and visionary leaders who boldly share their beliefs, lessons, and fuck-ups. Excited? So am I. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And now, let's take this conversation off the beaten track. Hi, and welcome to the Scenic Route podcast. This is the show for building a successful and sustainable business on your terms. My name is Jen, and I'm a rebranding sociologist with a soft spot for rhubarb pie. Each week, I'll strive to expand your branding, business expertise, and mindset capacity. I'm so excited you're here, and now let's get into today's episode. Kaileen Elise is an intuition coach who helps her clients cut through the noise in everyday life and get back in touch with their truest selves. She found her way into this work after the birth of her second child, when she realized her inner voice held answers that she couldn't find elsewhere. She believes intuition is the key to alignment, ease, manifesting, and finding fulfillment in life. This is why she teaches others how to access their intuition and trust what they hear. Kaileen lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and their 3 young children. She also boasts past lives as a collegiate swimmer, published author, Silicon Valley startup recruiter, and wellness company co-founder. Today on the Scenic Route podcast, I am absolutely excited to be joined by Kaileen. We met actually on Emma Natcher's School of Entrepreneurship. So we immediately knew we're like-minded people, and I'm super excited to have her here. Kaileen, give us a bit of an idea of who you are. Like, walk us through your story. What were your pivotal crossroads and big moments?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited for this conversation. And goodness gracious, that is always just such a question that leaves you at the edge of the cliff of like, where am I going to go and what's going to come through today? But at this moment, I am an intuition coach and a mom of 3. I also have a podcast called Celebrate, Cultivate. And these days, the thing I do for work is spend time supporting women, helping them connect to their inner voice, their intuition. So unlike traditional coaching out there, which is wonderful, and if that resonates for you, I'm so happy. Unlike that, where the coach is kind of guiding the individual on what the coach thinks or what research shows and XYZ experts, my work is really focused on helping people tune into what is true to them and hearing their inner voice inside of them. And that is something I think we all have innately within us when we arrive here on planet Earth. And then life happens and situations occur and we learn to look at experts and learn from teachers and coaches. And all of that is wonderful because there's so much to learn out there. But on top of that, we kind of pile this distrust for intuition and this separation from the fact that you do know what's best and right for you and that you do have your best interest at heart and that you can trust yourself. So I came to this work after the birth of my second child, when I had decided my whole life, I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That was my life goal. Mm-hmm. And I had two and under, had reached the pinnacle of my goal.
Yeah, like you're a warrior. That's 2 under 2 is.
It was, it was amazing. And it was also a lot different than what I expected. And it was different than I had imagined. And more importantly, I was a different mom than I had dreamt that I would be. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it was this very big, pivotal crossroads kind of moment where I knew I wanted to do something different with my time. And the way to finding that and trusting myself was through my intuition. And I originally started a business building websites for entrepreneurs on Squarespace because I had a blog since 2009 and I had built many websites sheer, experience, no study, like building graphics on PowerPoint and whatnot and exporting them to JPEGs.
That was before we had Canva. So thank God for Canva.
I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. Between Canva, as I pronounce it, and Squarespace, Squarespace. Like I built my sites on WordPress and then I moved a site from WordPress. Yeah. So different. So anyways, I did that for a while. And what I came around to discovering is that I was coaching a lot of my entrepreneurs on, I can build you a pretty website. Like I can definitely do that, but it's not going to give you what you want until it's in alignment with you, which I know is so much of what you teach.
Yes.
And I had famously told a friend of mine who was a coach at the time, there's no way I'll be a coach. I don't want to be a coach. And most of the reason for that was that I didn't necessarily want to talk about people's troubles. And everybody's truth is important to discuss, but I don't like to dwell in that too much. And I definitely didn't want to be taking on other people's troubles. And then I came to this kind of unique pocket of learning about intuition. And this isn't about your troubles. It's about listening to your truth and about what is right for you. And your intuition, your inner voice loves you no matter what. And it's just the source of pure love and wisdom and calm. And then when I figured out, I can help people access that, then my ideal
client, and not
client,
take on their trauma and
my ideal client and the client I work with every day is the people's inner voice. They're they're loving best parts of them and then helping them have that relationship with their loving best parts of them. And honestly, working myself out of a job sometimes. I've had clients that have worked with me for a long time who then don't need me anymore. And that is such a cause for celebration.
Yes.
So that's a little bit about, what I'm up to these days and how I got here.
I love so much about this. And yes, I feel this is often not talked about much because we talk often in the online business world of continuous client journeys and return per client and so on and so forth, which is all great. But at the end of when you're actually graduating from my services, hell yes, that's amazing. And that was also a part of, that's how I'm wired. And that's also I was such a bad employee. I would always get myself ridden out of things because I came in, cleaned everything up, was okay, now I'm not needed anymore. So goodbye.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense if you're employed, but.
And it's tricky. I mean, I do believe deeply that we all need help and support and guidance. And so any of my clients that have moved beyond needing me on a day-to-day basis, I still am doors always open for a tune-up, a check-in, whatever, because sometimes we can go seasons and years feeling really dialed in and connected to ourselves. And then life happens. It always does. And we can lose our way or feel like we're off track. And really, we're never as far off track as we think we are. We're just a little bit off, and to use the name of your podcast, sometimes you're just taking the scenic route. It isn't actually off track at all. And so it's about listening inward and finding out, okay, I am where I am. Now what? And that's, I think, a lot of the women I work with have gotten to a point in life where they've checked a lot of the boxes or discovered those boxes aren't for them. And they feel really good and at peace with that. But then still they're wondering what's next. And I've got, 30 more years of doing whatever, 40, 50 into what's now. And having a connection to yourself and your inner voice is really helpful when you're ready to pave your own path and do what feels good and right for you, and as opposed to following everybody else's, pathway. Yeah.
Agreed. It makes me, I want to circle back to something in your introduction, but this feels, this is calling me more right now. You said when you're never really that far off, but in the moment you feel, at least when I've experienced this, it feels like you're miles and miles and miles. You have an entire ocean between it. And it almost feels like you kind of intellectually, you can trust your intuition, but it's kind of like you stopped along the way, you stopped trusting yourself. So you won't really take your inner voice, your intuition fully into account because you stop trusting yourself. You kind of stop having your own back, which is not a conscious decision by any means. It just kind of like happened. So how if we're in the middle of that and we feel it's actually like there's an ocean gigantic divide, how can we, before we hear our wisdom again, how can we learn to trust ourselves again?
Oh man, I mean, I can feel it as you're talking about it. I can feel those feelings that I've had where it feels like there's, an ocean apart. And one of the things that makes that pain so acute is feeling like it's permanent. And I know in my experience as a mother, the most miserable moments in pregnancy, in birth, in taking a kid to school, whatever the case may be, the most painful moments are when there's a voice inside of you telling you that it's going to be like this way forever.
Mm-hmm.
Or if, my son is not being kind to his siblings, then that he's going to be a bully when he's 18 and, run off the rails. And it like the spiral occurs. And so it feels like not only are you off track and the ocean is spanning in front of you, but also that it's going to be like that forever.
Yeah, the track is set. And it's going to doomhood. It's
irreparable damage. Like it's permanent. And we also do know when we're not in that moment that nothing is permanent, and nothing being permanent is something we also fear and can also create this like spiral of like, I want it to be like this forever. It's never going to change. It's this like tension point that does make it really difficult to hear your inner voice and to trust what you receive. So if you're in one of those super painful moments, or if your kid is having a tantrum and you're having to slam them into the car seat or whatever it is, or client is being extremely difficult, and it just being compassionate with yourself and with whoever you're interacting with, and knowing that everything has momentum. Things will always move. Seasons change, the sun's going to rise. All that stuff is really true. And sometimes the greatest gift that we can give ourselves and give the moment is patience and breathing. And by being patient, by breathing, by knowing that most of the time it's not like a life or death situation in these moments, that you don't actually have to make a decision. You don't actually have to take action, nor do you necessarily want to when you're in that crisis moment, big or little. Being fair with yourself on that and knowing like, okay, this is terrible. It's not going to be terrible forever. That can be really, really helpful, because I think there is this like, as we're sitting here calm talking, there is this kind of desire of like, yeah, but when I really needed my intuition, I couldn't get to it. And I think that realistically, if you could hear your intuition in those really tough moments, it would just say, breathe and feel this. Yeah. And you're going to be
guide you out of like that really high pressure situation.
Guiding you through it. Yeah. Not necessarily taking you out of it, because out of it makes it sound like backwards or around the corner.
True is
but going
much better wording.
Through it. Yeah. And there's this concept that many teachers have, spoken to and talked around. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. Bella Lively calls it emotional beanbags, which is a term she came up with. But everybody has these different ways of describing the emotions that live within our body. And it's not part of the physical body, but in the emotional body. And those emotions, if they are not felt, if they are not expressed and experienced through therapy, somatic therapy, yoga, breathing, whatever, running, I don't care what, if they're not experienced and moved through, it will always be hard to hear your intuition. It will always be hard to trust. You may hear it. You probably will hear it. And then you'll say, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me. Or yeah, but I
your
know
logic
better.
Brain kind of like cuts you out and be like, no,
because your logic brain is afraid of feeling that feeling and wants to protect you from that feeling. And that's an honorable effort. But we all know if and we're not we're not always ready to feel all the feelings, right? That's part of life, is we have our whole life to flow through all of this. So I don't ascribe to the belief that you have to go hunting for these things. But when it's safe and ready to be released, if you can work with somebody like me or whoever in your life that can support you in flowing through and feeling those emotional beanbags to their extinction, like feeling them to completion, then that topic, that subject, whatever, you can actually trust your inner voice on, because the emotional charge is no longer there.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Like, you also trust yourself that whatever kind of somatic experience, beanbag or pain body is rising up, this is the one to look at in the situation, right? Not go hunting or whatever. And I know we always if you're in the self-growth and sphere, it's not, you're not supposed to like brush your emotions under the carpet, because they'll stay there. They're not gone. They're still there. But you can brush them. Like, you can just acknowledge them under the carpet, knowing that they'll still be there years from now. And you have to be really honest with yourself if you're like avoiding, or if you're like, I am not ready yet. And that's okay.
Yeah. And that's trusting yourself, right? That's knowing. And also, even more importantly, when you come to the point where you're like, oh, okay, this is an interesting practice. This is something I'm going to start paying attention to now that I'm 38 years old and ready to kind of handle some of these things. To not beat yourself up for not doing it earlier. To not giving yourself grief on like, oh, well, I should have handled this before. No, you didn't. The other thing that happens so often is that like, you're like, I thought I already dealt with this. I thought I already handled this. Why is it coming back up? And it's coming back up because now you're at this different place with different tools, different resources and knowledge. And there's more to grow through. There's more to learn. And so I think the beating yourself up and giving yourself grief and feeling guilt and all of that is a thing to release in itself, because it's just going to get in the way of really having that connected trust with yourself.
Yeah. Where do you think that beating yourself up, I think we both agree that it's happening fairly often. I see it in my clients too. Like, oh, why haven't I started working on my brand like years ago? Why haven't I been on Instagram like a gazillion different ways? Why do you think that this is showing up so much?
There just really isn't much of an appreciation or importance placed on accepting where you are and being satisfied with where you are. That's not a very sexy topic. And who's going to go around marketing like, oh, be happy with where you are in life? Like, nobody's going to sell anything saying that. And so there's just and I don't think marketing is evil. I think marketing is most of the time genius, but a lot of times it's going to make you feel like you're not enough, like you're not doing enough. And there's, even if you are not part of hustle culture, even if you've like pushed that aside, you are still part of culture.
You're still human. There's no escape. Like, we are in unfair, deeply capitalistic systems. Like, there's no way around it unless you, I don't know, completely isolate yourself in the woods. Maybe.
Right. And even then, I guess you probably might not be satisfied with all of the, provisions that you've curated for yourself, because now you're living in the woods by yourself and you don't know how long your food's going to last. So like, on a deep innate level, there is something inside of us humans that makes us want more and makes us want to do more. But speaking from, immense privilege, if you are not in a situation where your like core needs are at risk, then developing some sort of practice in gratitude or appreciation, finding a way to be satisfied with what is, that can really help soothe some of this. And I think one of our jobs in personal development, self-growth, whatever you want to call it, is to soothe the part of us that is like gripping for more, and telling that piece of Kaileen, like, hey, like, have you looked around a lot lately? Because, like, you're good. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And can you just appreciate what you have? And when you have that kind of conversation with yourself, then I think it is easier to not beat yourself up for not doing things because you're like, wow, yeah, I have like a pretty good life right now. Not everything's perfect, but
Mm-hmm.
on the whole, it's okay. And that's
Yeah.
really, a nice feeling.
Yeah. Like the media messaging around that is so true. It's always from a lack of, and you're lacking and it's your fault and you got to do better. Whether you got to work harder for your health, for your business success, for whatever. Yeah, and you're right. Like telling people to be satisfied is not gonna, it's probably not gonna
Yeah,
sell
because like
much.
what's a synonym for satisfaction that like would be negative, be like complacent. Nobody wants to be
Oh
complacent. And
no,
it's like
no.
essentially could look the same on
Yeah. Or
paper.
comfort.
Oh, yeah.
Like comfort zone. I really hate that this word has such a bad rep
I
because
know.
I like comfort. Like who doesn't? I mean, seriously. Like I like yes, there is a time to go hard and push yourself, but dear, comfort is amazing.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. And I
At
would
this age, I'm like comfort.
yes, and I would argue that most people are uncomfortable with being comfortable and that you could push yourself to be more comfortable most of the time. And then, of course, you're totally right. It's a fine line. And again, that's where intuition and knowing yourself and trusting yourself can really
Mm-hmm.
support you because we are also growth seeking beings and we're on this earth to evolve and grow. And so that's going to happen naturally and in so much more alignment with your true self in a
Yeah.
way that is truly satisfying when you have a conversation with your intuition. Because what happens a lot is that you can hustle and grind and do all the things and manifest and get all the stuff that whatever, get the job, get the family, get all the stuff. You're like, okay, cool, I did it. And I don't feel exactly like what I thought I was going to feel like. I got to my goal and I'm not happy. And it's because it
Yes.
was not in alignment with you to begin with, or along the
Yes.
way, you were really pushing yourself in areas that maybe you didn't need to. And I have experienced that many times in my life where I've gotten to the mountaintop and I was like, wait, this isn't, I don't know. Why was I working so hard for this when
Yeah.
it doesn't taste like how I thought it was going to taste?
Yeah. And I mean, in my case, I was on top of the mountain. I put my flag up on the top and I was like, I am on the brink of total exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
I did not enjoy the journey at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I probably have to take a time out for 6 months now. So what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, this cannot be it. And then like enter burnout.
Exactly. Yeah, but sometimes the view is worth it. So again, to not beat yourself up for like, okay, yeah, you did do that. And
Yeah.
there is a wonderful thing about being able to put your stake in the ground, look around and need a nap for 6 months. That's a lesson, a really important
Yeah.
lesson to learn.
And it's also nice to know that you and your body are physically capable of doing things. I mean, there's always something to learn from. But you brushed on that. It's a lot of us, we do things, and that goes for whatever we're doing here, self-growth, spiritual development, and so on. It goes for that too. We do things because we kind of have the expectations when we do that, then.
Mm-hmm.
So if I release all my bean bags, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling happy or whatever. And it's like, it's not actually working like that. Like, and the same, like it goes for, if I'm going to do that if I've lost that weight, the baby weight, or if I've done that. And like, you'll be still pretty fucking miserable even when you lost 20 pounds. Like that's not gonna magically turn on the happy switch.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also this like big premium on happy. There's like this really big, like that's the end destination. And it's, that's why I think satisfaction and fulfillment and these kind of more subtle energies are something I aspire towards and that I align with, because you can be satisfied in a moment and then you can be really freaking irritated at your kids in the next, and you're still human. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I don't think that
Yes.
we're trying to avoid emotion. If anything, I'm at a point in my life where I'm really trying to allow my emotions, model my emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and not beat myself up for having them, but also, learning how to modulate them in a way that's healthy and good for me and for those around me.
Yes, which kind of goes into another really interesting concept of let's put it like bluntly like this. Women are allowed to have some emotions and we're not allowed to have others. And there are a whole many spaces who tell us kind of like, oh no. Like when you're very vocal about something, it's like, oh, she's like, you already get like a lot of bad, like, I don't know, bad connotations thrown at you. And it's really, I like what you said and resonates so strongly with me. I'm like the point where like, no, I allow my emotions to take up space. And it's okay. And yes, I might not always express them retrospectively the way I kind of thought maybe would have been, I don't know, more appropriate almost.
Yeah.
But I mean, then again, I'm still learning, right? Like, I mean, I'm coming from someone who had almost no, I don't know, I had barely any, let's call it emotional education growing up. And I think that resonates with a lot of us who have boomer parents. That wasn't something, emotions wasn't something we, I don't know, would have been articulated or talked about often. So sometimes I feel like my 3.5-year-old is like more emotionally mature than I am.
Yeah, it's very possible that that's true. And
Yes.
that's a very difficult spot to be in, to be learning on the fly when 3.5-year-old has quite the expressions of emotion. And though they can be very overwhelming. I mean, we had in my household today so many emotions between my three children. Just before 10 a.m., I hadn't even had my second cup of coffee. And there was, and so if you personally don't have a relationship with emotions that feel safe and good and true, then how can you feel when others are emoting in their own right? It's very difficult. I would say my relationship with emotions growing up was different than what it sounds like yours were, in that there was a lot of yelling in my house, a lot of yelling. And so things were expressed, but they were just not necessarily expressed in a safe way. And so for me, learning in my journey, I always just default to yelling because that was what was modeled to me. And then there's this huge, dissonance between like how I really feel and then how I'm expressing, and then this like guilt afterwards. And so flowing through that and learning for me that, okay, well, I, tend to yell. I would like to have a quieter, less scary voice with my children when it's not necessary. And I've been gifted these kids where my daughter will say, Mama, it scares me when you talk with that voice. And she says it so calmly that I'm like, okay, well, I just wanted you to know that I'm serious, but next time I will try to use a softer voice.
But yeah, that's so great, right? About young kids. They learn by you doing but what you do and not what you say. And at the same time, they're mirroring back at you. And for me, and that goes back to what you initially said in here, like that you grew to be a different mother than you would expected you to be. Like I'm curious, what kind of mom did you think you would be prior to having kids?
Well, I was the oldest grandchild out of both sides of my families, and I always loved being around babies. From early as I can remember, I wanted to be a mom, and specifically a stay-at-home mom. And I always said I wanted to have 4 kids. I have 3. I'm not so sure. I still want 4. And I babysat. I taught swim lessons. I got my degree in elementary education. I've always loved children. And then when I had my own, I loved them, of course, but they were much less exciting to me in a way that other people's children were when I didn't have kids, and a lot more exhausting. And I learned about human design in motherhood as I became a mom. And I'm a projector, which, if you are unfamiliar with human design, you can look it up. I have a blog post about it, but projectors don't have a consistent source of energy.
No,
and
we need rest.
We need rest. And we also tend to be high achieving overperformers who don't know how to rest. And so
this should be in my new Instagram bio. This is the nutshell. Yes, I agree.
And for me, what that meant is that I would do these big bursts of energy where I'd like clean the house and do the things and, have dinner ready. And then like 3 days would pass and I would have no energy to do anything household related. And I would just have these ups and downs where I felt like, gosh, like I imagined that I would do all of the things all the time and I would be delighted by all of it and be so joyful and just like, feel the way I felt when I was teaching in a kindergarten classroom, that I would feel that way about my own children. And it's so different. It's so, so different. And so for me, I learned how to be the kind of mom that's really okay with sitting and chilling and watching my kids play and like setting things up for them, but then walking away. And I'm not the make-believe, pretend play parent in this house. I like to kind of like set things up for them and let them come upon them and then just kind of like sprinkle in. And I also had this big realization when my first was born that I didn't feel like a gentle person. I didn't know that I even wanted to be a gentle person. I didn't feel calm. I didn't feel gentle. And then I had this tiny little critter who was so soft and snuggly. And I just wanted to be soft and snuggly for him in a way that I was always just very like type A, go, go, go. And I never identified with being gentle. To where like even like putting on lotion on my face, like I was like, gosh, I'm really rough with myself. Like I want to be softer and gentler. And so that was, like it wasn't until I became a mom that some of these things I wanted got on the table for me wanting them. And then other things I was like, oh, never mind. Like I hate doing crafts. I do not want to craft with my children ever. I do not enjoy it. We are fortunate enough that we have a full-time nanny, and crafting is one of her greatest strengths. And if she ever has kids someday, I do believe that she will still enjoy crafts. I am not that. And she loves to cook with the kids. Another thing that I like to cook, but I like my kitchen a certain way. And if you're cracking eggs with a 2-year-old, you deserve a medal. Like I cannot do that.
Or any cooking at all, or any crafting at all with a 2-year-old, with like 2 to 4-year-old is like.
I may be the kind of grandma that I thought the kind of mom, but it's going to take me decades and a lot of sleep to get to the point.
But again, like you most likely will be that grandma, right? Because the grandma, is the cool part where you take the kids for a day or two and then you're like, bye, see you later. Like I have me time now. Whereas when you're a new mom, me time was not really a concept that and it really, for me, like, and I want to talk about this in the second part of our conversation, because that's initially the premise I kind of invited you in on the Scenic Route podcast, because you shared an Instagram post, I think it was at the time, about mothering yourself. And I was like, ooh, that resonates deeply. And that's something I've realized when my son was born, and then like now teaching him through like through emotions and all those things and the early years. I'm like, I have no recollection at all of a lot of these things I am modeling for my son. And I'm like, huh. And I started like, I mean, I've always done work. I've always been like, I did somatic experience also before, but I kind of really went on a deep dive and it brought up a lot of really not so pleasant beanbags. Um, and one of that was also like, I don't know what is called in literature, what is often referred to as a mother wound. And it was really like, oh, yes, it really resonated with, I kind of like have to learn how to mother myself. Like I'm learning what mothering means through my son, but I've never like experienced it per se. Like my parents were great providers, but they were not carers. So I'm like, what does like how do I start mothering myself? Where do we even begin?
Yeah. I think you begin when you realize that that's something that you want to do. And then
Mm.
you get to look at where in your life are you not getting the love, the compassion, the support that you maybe had imagined at some point you would be receiving from your mom. And even in the point I just mentioned about wanting to be more gentle with myself, it
Mm-hmm.
is giving yourself permission to put on lotion in a softer, gentler way when you have the thought, I want to be more gentle. I think there's a lot of even just that tiny thing of thinking to yourself, I want XYZ, and then not giving yourself permission to do that for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
thinking you don't have time or whatever, or even just it occurring to you that you can, like that is
Mm-hmm.
something that we,
Or just actually noticing that you're slapping on the
yeah,
lotion instead of like
yeah,
gently
yeah.
caressing your face.
Yeah. And maybe when I was a child, maybe people were slapping lotion onto me. Do you know how hard it is to lotion a child? They're moving all about, crazy little animals. So like so it's a bad analogy, but it's a good analogy. I have 3 kids.
Mm.
Only one of them likes it when I put lotion on. The other two, I'm
Mm.
probably more rough than I need to be because I just want
The
to get the job
sunscreen
done.
battle is the battle of every summer. It's like I don't know.
Yeah. So it's really hard, I think, to be a parent. And there really isn't, there kind of is now that conversation and dialogue on, oh, this is difficult, but really there hasn't been a lot of change to support mothers specifically.
Yes.
And that's on a policy, societal level that I don't have the bandwidth to take on at this exact moment. But I think it's important to acknowledge the soup
Yes.
that you're swimming in. And then
Oh, yes.
right. And then to look at, well, how can I give myself that love and how can I give myself that support? And what would that look like? And knowing that the lineage of mothers that you come from can sometimes be really helpful. I mean, when I look back down the line, there really just wasn't very much mental health or support, or, people had children quite young in my family. So they didn't have a lot of money and they didn't have a lot of education and they had some mental health problems. You combine that for a few generations stacking backwards, it makes a lot of sense why I grew up the way that I did, which isn't how I necessarily want my children to grow up, but I'm learning. And even that is an act of self-mothering, because if you can get that amount of space to say, okay, I want to do it differently. And how does that look? And not beat yourself up when you yell at your kids, but live with compassion in yourself that, like, okay, that was my default response. I do not want to do that again. And being kind, and then giving yourself that, the kindness, the compassion, the self-care, whatever it is, giving that to yourself. That's what self-mothering is. And I would venture to say that people who have amazing relationships with their mothers probably also need a dose of self-mothering, because we're always going to want certain things from other people that really we can only truly give to ourselves.
Yeah. Or we have to give it ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think there is a interdependency to that. Yeah. And also there's a lot of making peace and being at peace with that, you like, from your mother or from any relationship, that you will not, you most likely will never get what you were hoping to get.
Yeah. And there's this responsibility and maybe pressure that can come with recognizing that if anybody's going to give it to you, it's got to be you. Then it's like, oh my gosh, I have so much on my to-do list. I like really don't have time for more to do more. And now I got to do it for myself. And so there's this paradigm shift that occurs where you start to see that it's, the oxygen mask thing isn't a fallacy. That is really true. If you've passed out, you cannot put an oxygen mask on your child. And it is a much longer path. And you really have to have a vision for yourself in your 70s and 80s and look at her and say, okay, I'm taking care now so that I can be the vibrant, youthful, appreciative you, healthy, safe you that I want to be when I'm 70. Because we all know people who in their 70s and 80s that don't have their stuff together and wish they had sooner. So it is like, it's like, saving for your retirement when you're in your 20s. That's when you should be saving, because it's going to exponentially compound, but you don't think
which is not sexy when you're in your 20s.
Exactly. And then you hit your 40s and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had been saving. And so the same thing applies. And so to not put extra pressure on yourself, but to know that little, tiny, small acts compound in the same way that if you had put a few dollars in your 20s, it would compound. The same thing applies, that if you start to listen to your intuition, create that relationship now, just think about how strong that connection will be in 15 years, in 20 years. If you start to take care of your basic needs and really support your own personal nourishment, not what, the experts are telling you or whatever, but really listening to what does my body want and need, and developing that connection now over time, and being patient with it, with your body, with yourself, making space for you, however big or small that space is, right? Like it could literally be clearing out a drawer or a little tiny corner of a cabinet, and like cultivating some tiny space that brings you joy. For me, it's my closet. It's the only room in my house that is
you do
just
have a
mine.
gorgeous closet, though.
It is gorgeous, but I've really made an effort to make it gorgeous. It has been a huge effort of mine for 7 years to make this space mine. And I'm kind of ruthless about it. Like that, I'm not going to. Do you know where all the extra stuff in our house gets stored? In my husband's closet, not in mine, because I'm not going to share my space.
Yours is a zen space. I'm like, no.
I'm like, I gotta. And to be fair, there's a dirty laundry basket right here that I'm staring at. So it's not perfect. And that's the other thing. We're not striving.
We're not looking for perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, we're not looking for perfect. So let's kind of I want to circle back on what you said about stacking tiny little habits on top of each other, right? Because that goes for money, that goes for habits. Like Atomic Habits basically is the book if you want to know more about that. So can we say, and that word also has a bad rep, but maybe when we call it so let's say cultivating a sort of gentle approach to discipline is also a way of mothering ourselves?
If that's what you need, right? Like it's really a soup that you are making to your own specific tastes. And so there are some people who really actually don't need discipline. They need the allowance and the permission to not manage their schedule and their calendar. That's me. Like I was always calendaring, so many hours and time spent managing a calendar. And the more radical, more truthful approach for me is not putting everything on my schedule, I don't keep a paper calendar anymore after 30 years of having a paper calendar.
I love this for you.
Yeah. So discipline for some, right? And the having rituals and rhythms for yourself is really important, I believe, because those rituals are something that are going to anchor and ground you to who you are and bring you back to what's important. Have soothing, calming, tactile strategies that are going to help you feel good. And rhythms are something that are going to ebb and flow and change based on what season it is in life and in nature. Like my discipline, in your words, my discipline for summer is going to be very different than fall because my kids are out of school in the summer. So there's a lot more chaos and a lot less quiet for me to do my client sessions and my podcast. Like I work out of my house. So there's all these people in my house. I'm not going to have that. So rhythms are something that you can come back to, when it's nice and warm outside, going for a morning walk. When it's snowy and cold outside, morning walks aren't going to serve you. Well, maybe for some, but that's not going to serve me. So then it's, finding a gentle yoga practice or going to a Pilates class and allowing myself to shift and change in what feels good now and not anchoring myself to, I was 20 pounds lighter when I was going to Pilates every day. Like that is, that's a tendency that most of us have. Is like, okay, well, how do I get back to where I was? And what was I doing to do that? And again, your mind is going to have a billion ideas, but if you exhale, and really listen to your intuition, it's going to be simple and straightforward. Your intuition is going to tell you, drink more water, like go to bed. It might say something you weren't expecting about,
or try different exercise that you never really thought about. And you're like, oh,
or it's gonna give you somebody's name and that's your friend, and your friend has this other thing, and so you go do walks around the lake with them. So it's gonna guide you in ways that your mind isn't gonna tell you what to do. But if you've been living from your mind for however long you've been living, it's okay to experiment and try another resource of wisdom inside of you.
Yeah. Yes. And I see that discipline is not really the right word, but I don't know, when you hear your intuition and it tells you something to maybe go for that lake walk, and you hear it, but you have to turn that into, I don't know, aligned action, right? Just thinking of it is not enough.
Yeah.
Just manifesting about it is not enough.
Yeah.
You need action. And I see this with my clients, but also in myself more than I'd like to admit. But whenever we try something new, it feels uncomfortable as fudge. Our body does not want to do this. Whether it's like a new exercise or a new diet, whatever. New, uncomfortable. Even if it's better for you when you're 70, the uncomfortableness in the right now stops a lot of people from doing it again and again and again. So maybe one way of moving through that is actually being okay with the uncomfortableness. Yes, it's supposed to feel uncomfortable because you're doing something new. Or how you're looking at that?
Yeah. So one thing is if you have young children or if you have access to one and you look at what they do.
Borrow one. You can borrow mine.
You can look at what
this
they
afternoon.
do. Yeah. They fall and they get back up. They, they explore and they experiment, but they also don't have these lofty expectations of performance, of results. They do things until,
and they have no stories of that success in their heads.
Right. They're experimenting, they're playing, they
Mm.
do something until it feels good or until their interest gets turned somewhere else, and then they move on to something
Usually
else.
after 7 minutes
And they're
of any
totally fine.
activity.
Yeah, and they're totally fine with it. So I think there's something to be said for being radically honest with yourself on where you are finding joy and delight, and what would
Mhm.
happen if you gave yourself permission to prioritize that, to really truly let yourself dwell in the beauty of the leaves blowing in the trees outside and stay there for a while. And then when you get your stomach grumbles like, oh, I forgot, it's time to eat, and really just kind of tuning in more to yourself. Now, again, if you have all of these emotions and stories and beanbags piled up, it's going to be really hard to trust that joy and
Mhm.
delight are your greatest teachers, because you've been told and you believe that, discipline and action are the ways to
And
get what you
pain
want.
and just
Yeah. So it's really helpful to experiment in areas of your life where things do feel more intuitive and more flowy and
Mhm.
easy. So if that's in your work, then experiment with handing the reins over to your intuition in work, places where you feel safe and okay and successful
Mhm.
already. That's going to be a good place to develop that trust. But the tool I've been playing with more is honesty, because if I'm
Mm.
truly honest with myself about what my intuition's telling me,
Mhm.
I don't have to listen to it. I don't have to listen to my mind. I don't have to listen to my intuition. But being honest about really where that information is coming from and
Yeah.
trusting that I know it. Because so often when people get into this work, the first thing they went, well, how do I know for sure that it's my intuition? Or how do I know it's not my mind pretending to be my intuition?
Ooh.
Oh my gosh. I've gotten that question so many times. And
This
it's
is
like,
like very meta.
your
Okay, yeah.
mind is asking that question. Your mind is asking, is my mind pretending to be my intuition? So you got to be honest with yourself about this. And it's a little bit of a trust fall. I don't know. Let's just see. It doesn't actually
Mhm.
matter where it's coming from. If it feels good and true and right for you, it's going to be okay. So the honesty is a key piece. And then the other thing is the element of experience and experimenting. So just let's see.
Yes.
For you, if you were like, okay, I'm embarking on this new exercise or this new diet thing, and it's so uncomfortable and I hate it, but I also know it's going to delight me when I'm 70, and so I'm willing to be miserable. The thing that's soothing to the mind is to say, well, let's just see what happens in 30
Yeah.
days. Let me just 10 days, or I'll try it for, that whole thing about like, oh, well, just take yourself on a 10-minute walk. And before you know it, you'll be walking for 60. And it's like, we do sometimes have to give our mind a carrot, and that's like supporting it and soothing it, just like you would a child. That's self-mothering, is being like, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
you're not in the mood for a walk. I see that. That's, Netflix is really compelling because they just keep playing shows over and over again, which makes you feel like you shouldn't get off the couch. But I have a really good podcast for you to listen to. Come on. And being like gentle and cute and sweet with yourself can go a
Mm.
long way.
Yeah. That is so true. And yeah, and really be like, hey, how can I really next time you're like, oh, okay, I really do not want to do this thing, whatever it is, your new exercise, your tax returns, whatever.
Yeah.
Go at it from an angle of mothering yourself.
Yes.
Like, what would you
Yes.
say to your child, to your inner child?
And like
Right? Like,
don't do it. Don't do the action when you're in a miserable mood. Do not do that.
yeah.
Is not the time to do it. But can you gently nudge and guide and mother and curate an experience for yourself? You're like, oh, look, I made you some tea. I'm burning your favorite candle. Come on, you can do it. And like, do that. It's like so fun to play with and that's what our children are doing when they're playing. They're like, ooh,
Yeah.
look, I can stand on this and jump. That's so cool. That's so cool and entertaining. And
Yeah.
they're in that mode of being their best playmate, and you can be your best playmate still. You're just a little out of practice, but again, you're not too far off the path. You do it a few times and you're like, oh wow, I really like it when I make myself a bath with bath salts. That's delightful. And then, self-care becomes something that isn't what you're doing out of objection because you're
Yeah.
supposed to take care of yourself, but it's because it actually gives you delight.
Yes. And please use the good bath salt, the one that you stored away for like special occasions.
Yeah. Because if you
Use
don't,
it.
they're just
Use it
gathering
now.
dust anyway. Use them. Yeah.
Oh God. Like I think the time just kind of flew by. I want to let everyone know who's listening that if they're like, I want to work more with my intuition. I'm curious now. You got something for us that is kind of like a super introduction to kind of like listen to your intuition and live in alignment with your inner wisdom. Do you want to tell us quickly more about it?
Yeah. So I have a free program called 21 Days to Intuition, and it's a 3-week experience where every day you have a prompt from me that helps you guide yourself to listening to your intuition on little everyday moments. So some of them are like letting your intuition take you for a walk or a drive to work, or having your intuition pick out what you wear today. And so every day for 3 weeks, you're just developing a deeper connection to your intuition. And there's journal prompts and lots of support along the way to encourage you. I actually like read the responses to the journal prompts and respond to them. So I am on the other side cheering you on and answering your questions. And so that's always a really great place to start, or a great place to reconnect and reignite that connection if it feels like it's been a while since you've listened, but you know you have an intuition. I have clients that do it every year because they just love not having to think of what to ask their intuition about, but just to be able to connect on a different topic
Connect
every day.
into the stream.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done it myself. It's really delightful.
Thank you.
I was really enjoying it. So please, if you've liked Kaileen's approach, go sign up for her 21 Days of Intuition.
Yes.
You will not regret it.
It's at KaileenElise.com, and I know you'll link to it in the show notes. But
we will link it in the show notes. And also, you hang out most on Instagram, I think.
That's my main place to play. Yeah, I also have a newsletter, and I have a membership that people can join if they want more deep one-on-one coaching with me for a full year. That's called the Season Sessions. And I love connecting on Instagram. I've been on Instagram for so long, so many years.
Since the early days,
over a decade.
Had all the same weird filters, like the one that turned everything dark.
Yes,
it was.
It was a different place.
Pictures of our food. Yeah, we were so carefree. We took pictures of our food and our outfits, and it was just bliss.
It was. And think, what we're talking about today, like we'll be saying that, podcasting we were just sitting in our closet talking, so things change. But this has just been so delightful. I really appreciate you. And I'm excited to connect with your community and hopefully see a few people in 21 Days to Intuition.
Yay. Thank you so much for spending the time with me on the Scenic Route podcast, Kaileen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Scenic Route podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and that you can take something from it that feels right to you. I'd be so grateful if you could share the Scenic Route podcast with others. As always, you can head over to scenicroutepodcast.com to check out all the links and resources from today's episode. Oh, and while you're there, don't forget to download my free email course, Intuitive Branding Invitation, to teach you how you can successfully tune into your own brand frequency and rediscover your brand's unique gifts, strengths, and talents. So thanks again. Talk soon. And just like that, we've reached the end of another journey together on the Scenic Route podcast. Thank you for spending time with us. Curious for more stories or in search of the resources mentioned in today's episode? Visit us at scenicroutepodcast.com for everything you need. And if you're ready to embrace your scenic route, I've got something special for you. Step off the beaten path with my Scenic Route affirmation card deck. It's crafted for those moments when you're seeking courage, yearning to trust your inner voice, and eager to carve out a path authentically, unmistakably yours. Pick your Scenic Route affirmation today and let it support you. Excited about where your journey might lead? I certainly am. Remember, the Scenic Route is not just about a destination, but the experiences, learnings, and joy we discover along the way. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the Scenic Route again.